Hello. So I was thinking about this. I was going to share this with you that I came across something. I can't even remember what it was, but it felt like it was related to my chart or some of the energies that I hold around when things are scripted, it doesn't really work. And I've been thinking about like our intro and
Mm.
kind of sometimes it doesn't really feel that authentic, I would say. It feels a little forced. So one of the things I had thought about last time was just kind of just jumping right in, just saying hello. Because yeah, like sometimes I don't even know what I'm gonna say
You don't need to
other than
explain it.
yeah,
Yeah.
other than welcome. I'm
Welcome.
Rafaela and this is Hannah.
And this is the Led by Life podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
funny because your incarnation cross is the cross of consciousness.
mhm.
And I I think so much of that, I mean, I have to, you can speak more to this. I'd have to learn a bit more about the incarnation cross, but I remember hearing somewhere it is about like just sharing without overthinking and whatever comes out.
Yeah. I don't
Would
know
you
if I've
agree with
ever
that?
heard that. I don't know if it's that I've heard, but what I've experienced more is my strategy of informing, of just sharing whatever it is that wants to be expressed without control is the best way to use my strategy. And so I that's what I think I was reading up on or kind of like experimenting with. And it kind of when I was reading it reflected back to me like, oh yeah, I feel like my our intro is just not really reflective of the way that my strategy wants to work. Of
Mm.
course, I want to introduce ourselves and say that you and I both have manifestor energy, and that's how Hannah and I um, got together. For anyone who's new or hasn't heard before, but sometimes, like everything after that, I'm like, I don't know.
It's it's interesting because we are both ego manifestors,
Mhm.
very rare authority, and it comes from the heart. The voice
Yeah.
that you're forming comes from the heart, and we both have different configurations of how that voice expresses itself. So, and I have heard for both, for the ego manifested authority. So, for anyone who's interested, we both have ego manifested authority, but mine is like a combination of ego projected and self projected. So, from the heart to the identity center to the throat. And for Rafa, it is the ego manifested. So it's both ego manifested, but it's just like a slightly different way that it uh, comes about. And it really is about like just expressing whatever you, and maybe that's what I'm getting confused with what I was saying before about the cross of consciousness. But it's like, yeah, just speaking your truth, speaking from your heart,
Hmm.
but not
Yeah.
overthinking it or scripting it.
Right. Not scripting it, not overthinking it, not trying to control it, which is
Yes.
something that I've been coming back to experimenting with because it will have the most impact in that moment when I just allow myself to say whatever it is that I want to say and getting back into being in front of groups of people and speaking that I've shared this before on the podcast and getting back into like group work and being in a setting where like running meetings or being engaged with multiple people at one time, I've noticed that things I notice more of an impact on others when I just allow myself to show up and just surrender in that moment to whatever is going to come up is going to come up and it's going to be great.
Mm.
So, yeah, just FYI, if you don't hear a automated intro from Hannah and I, like we're just kind of following, our energetics, which I already feel so much better.
Yeah, me too. Like I haven't been overthinking this conversation at all,
Yeah.
which is really like what we're not supposed to be doing, using the mind as an authority. And I've
Right.
also heard that, like, I think Nikki said this, it'll be interesting, especially for me without having that connection from to the throat from my head centers. The voice will come out differently depending on who I'm around. So if I'm like speaking to someone who does have, like yourself, who does have that channel that connects the throat to the head centers. So I've got a defined ajna and crown, but no connection, like it comes out differently depending on who I'm around. And so that's kind of fun to experiment with as well. Like when I've been running some sessions for it's so synchronistic that we're talking about this, because I've personally been experimenting with not over scripting, not over planning what I'm going to say when it comes to like running sessions for clients as well, group sessions, and just trusting that whatever needs to be said and whatever they need to hear will come out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, I wanted to go back for a second because, well, one of the things that I've like been noticing with sharing or just speaking, or like, you said ego projected of honoring like what my wants to come out, or what my heart's desires are, or like what my heart wants, or um what I want is very interesting to kind of work with, especially when you're working with other people, right? Like you asked me this one question just a minute ago that you, what did you say? Like, well, what do you want to talk about? Was it?
What do you even want to talk about?
Yeah. And in that moment, I could I can notice these pauses where my brain wants to like think of the response. I don't just, even now in the last like 30 seconds when I was about, as I'm sharing what I'm sharing, it's so interesting in this moment to kind of just observe how my brain wants to like coordinate what is being said so that it makes sense.
Mm.
But I don't know if that's really my responsibility or just to allow myself to share, because while I have like that connection to the throat center for, maybe that's like an agent that helps in expression of whatever both of us have going on in our head centers, or sorry, in our ajnas. You have a defined head center and I don't. So
Mm.
sometimes I even wonder, is like, and I have all three gates defined that come out of it. So sometimes I feel like, what happens when we're together, like what's exchanging, that while I have the ability to maybe express it, you put some clarity in, like you fill in that gap that while
Mm.
I don't have. So yeah, I just think it's all kind of working.
Yeah, well, the 47, which connects it, is the gate of realization, or it's all about like clarity, epiphanies,
Hmm.
realizations. Yeah, it's so fascinating.
But you don't have that, and I don't have that one, right?
No, I do have that. I have the 47 connected to the 64, but you've got the 64.
Ah, okay. Yes, now I'm like remembering. Right,
Yeah.
right. Even more so. And it's just so funny because today's like episode, essentially, like one of the topics that we would be talking about, are going to talk about it because it's going to fit in just so beautifully, is the 17th, which is
Mm.
in the left side of the brain. It's logical, it's in the logic circuit, it's a logical energy, it's
Yeah.
rooted in opinions and maybe our perspective of life, I would say, one of our perspectives, but the shadow being opinions. And I was just thinking about how here we are talking about our overthinking, or like whatever that,
Our minds.
our minds, yes, our minds.
Yeah.
And today's gene key is essentially one of those shadow gift energy frequencies that are coming out of the mind, the logical circuit.
The ajna. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm. So neither of us have this defined in our charts, but we do have both have defined ajnas. So I suppose we can kind of resonate with the energies of the center, the defined
Yeah.
center, not so much. Well, yeah,
Do you think
differently.
so?
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree. Because, like, I understand, and we've said this before, like, we are all of it, right?
Mm.
I think sometimes we just have a stronger relationship with what's, well, I don't even want to say that because I think we can
Yeah.
have a strong relationship with defined or undefined.
Yeah.
And, but you're right. So you nor I have this defined in our charts. And reading it, I feel like, okay, I don't have this energy defined, but I feel like I can relate to it so much
Mm.
because essentially I feel like it does kind of have a tinge into my incarnation cross.
Explain that. It just cut out for a second. So explain that. I think you said something about it being related to your incarnation cross. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, like this ability to really step outside of a perspective and see all angles of the perspective and challenge the perspective so that it can lead us to, more awareness,
Greater
a
consciousness.
greater consciousness. I'm
Yeah.
even like, I don't know if you can tell, but like,
Yeah.
I'm even hesitant to say that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, ultimately, right? And and so I feel like I related to it a lot in the sense that, yeah, of course, I have my opinions about things, but I also feel like something that's often been reflected back to me is how open-minded I can be, which is a
Mm.
concept that was kind of talked about
Mm.
um, in 17th Jinki. So
Mm.
I feel like, yeah, I don't have that in my chart, but I could just see where I've created opinions and at the same time have had to gently challenge those opinions or see like um a wider perspective of whatever that is. For what? I don't know. I've just always done that.
Mm. Yeah. And so I want to know about why you feel reluctant to, in a way, claim that in your incarnation cross.
Because it feels big.
Okay. Yeah. How so?
Well, I mean, when I think of consciousness, I just think of like webs and webs and webs of energy just interrelated and interconnected all throughout everything. And that just feels way too big to have a sense of understanding of, but yet I know that I do. It's
Yeah.
about actually saying it out loud um, to whoever's listening to you, right? Just vocalizing it out loud. It's interesting because today I met with somebody and they were for the first time, probably ever, vocalizing things that they've never talked about. And I come across this often,
Mm.
but there is something unique about the power of your voice. And not only your voice, but what it is that your voice is saying,
Mm.
what it's speaking, the words that are being put together to come out, to claim something, to not claim something, to opinion something, to whatever it may be. um, it brings me to that one agreement, if you've ever read the Four Agreements,
Mm.
of being impeccable with your word. So I'm like, wow, that's a pretty big thing to say.
Mm. It makes me think of a lot of different things, of course. But the strongest thing that came to me was, oh, and I'm feeling this in my heart. Like, do you think a big part of everyone's journey when they discover things like human design or they're doing their experiment is to claim what they're here to do, which is so much based around our incarnation cross and those energies, those four energies that are that
Mm-hmm.
make up the most of our energy.
Yeah.
Because when I came across and we've talked about this before, my incarnation cross of the vessel of love, it felt so fitting and so familiar, but it
Mm-hmm.
also felt so big. And
Right.
one of the shadows that I've been working through as a manifester is claiming my bigness, claiming this
Mm,
aura, and overcoming these parts of me that didn't feel like they could just be big and be a big manifester. And it even sounds
yeah.
funny saying it, but I wonder if that's a big part of this process, is claiming
Mm-hmm.
incarnation cross, because the more and more and it's almost like it's not something you can intellectualize and think like, how can I be the embodiment of love? The brain, how, trying
Right.
to think about all these ways that I can embody love. It's
Right.
just something that kind of comes out as you
Right.
experiment more with your authority, your strategy, and all the energies that kind of work together. So would you say you've had a similar experience with the cross of consciousness? It's like something that's unfolding more in front of you as you become aware of it.
Yeah, and it's almost a little bit shocking because how can something that doesn't know you yet know you so well and call you out to do that thing? And it like as you were saying, you know, this expression of love and how like the vessel of love for yourself, one of the things that just like brought me back to was in this chapter there was this one sentence that was talking about how, from a very young age, we're kind of essentially like programmed with opinions of our society, opinions of our peers, our parents, just all coming from anywhere. And like they're planted in as children. And then you kind of like then act those out throughout like your cycles of life and throughout your experiences. And so one of the things that I thought about was, and it kind of relates to like a lot of our conversations, is how what is my opinion of love and how does that inform the way that I have to then express this vessel of love as an incarnation cross. And can we get out of like all of the different labels and boxes that we might put love into, like as a category? Because it said that too, of like being placed in different boxes or labels or titles and having opinions of each of those or whatever. But for myself, I I feel like it's taken me just each day a little bit more acceptance that like I can claim this and it can be as big and it can go out in all different types of directions, no matter what that looks like for me, as far as like consciousness, like what's my opinion of consciousness. And that's my own job. I'm not here to like convince anyone of like what consciousness is or what it's like to have different perspectives or be open-minded or trust how within doubt, like you actually get a little bit freer when you just acknowledge that there's doubt. It's like that polarity or something it was talking about. It's very interesting that you've kind of brought this together with our conversation together with the cross of consciousness, because the the 17th and the 18th are programming partners, and they have very similarities and correlations, but then it also talks about its relation to the 63rd.
Mm.
And right, the 63rd and 62, I can't remember, maybe the 62 because that's what it's connected to. I'm just
Yeah,
remembering.
yeah.
Yeah. um but either way, for me, there's this sort of layer in escaping out of the prison of our minds leads us to a higher consciousness. And so it's very interesting how these for me feel very correlated. Like I don't have the 17th, but I do have a defined ajna. And
Mm.
when I think of logic, I think of how logic has come into my life and how um, I feel like I push past certain boundaries of opinions, which is kind of fueled and like kind of motivated me a lot to do the kind of work that I do and just kind of be the person that I am. Um, like now knowing a little bit more of how it's okay to let myself sit in confusion and not necessarily know all of the answers, that it, it's okay. Just that, like, that's okay. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have like every step figured out or have a logical way of doing something. I just for 1 second can step out of like all of these mind games, so to speak. And in that,
Mm.
like at some point, the clarity or the answer or the system that needs to be known will let itself be known.
Mm.
I don't even know if that
And
answered your question.
I can't even remember what my question was. I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
um, but like that control, wanting to have control or wanting to have all the answers, wanting to know everything, and also being really attached to opinions, like this
Mm-hmm.
shadowed frequency of being opinionated, short-sighted, not being able to see all the different perspectives, in a way is like, again, this frequency of like, ah, yeah, being afraid of the unknown, being afraid of not knowing all the
Yeah.
answers, being afraid of letting go of control.
Well, in some way, like it's challenging your belief system.
Mm.
So if I'm gonna let go of control, or if I'm gonna um be opinionated or narrow-minded, then essentially it's like this attachment, right, to this thought process that I have.
Mm.
And I feel like sometimes this is what's really hard for individuals, is that to challenge that opinion is to challenge a belief.
And would you say that that is also challenging your identity and your ego, because it's like this sense of self and the beliefs that we have make up who we think we are and how we kind of see the world. So it is so like connected to our sense of self, our opinions, and our belief
Hmm.
systems. And that
Yeah.
can be really hard for people to let go of.
Yeah. No, for
Yeah.
sure. The way you kind of just shared that brought me back to like one of the main things that I kind of like really ran with when being introduced with human design was this idea that we talked about before, but of deconditioning.
Mm.
Essentially, it, to me, it's a system that allows you to experiment with letting go of just what's not authentically yours.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it before, but that doesn't like it, it's not easy. Like, and it's discomforting at times, right? And when we're, for a long time, we've all been kind of going through life through logic, through what makes the most sense. When you start to do things that make no sense but give you profound results, it's like, damn, now I can't just go off of logic anymore. And I recognize that for myself and the conversations that I've been having with people lately. It's like, yeah, and once you experiment with it often enough, right? Like today, like
Mm.
just the decision of I can't script our
Mm.
intro today, right? To me, like, of course, many times there's been a logical part of me that has said, well, then how is anyone going to know what you're talking about?
That's
Or
the way it should be done.
that's the
That's
way it
how
should be
everyone
done, or
else
that's
does
how,
it. Yeah.
right. And it takes some experimenting to allow yourself to do something that feels more aligned with you, but that you're not used to. And it's just because you're used to it, so it feels better.
Mm.
But, you know, within 5 seconds of us just kind of like getting into it, I challenged that. And I was like, no, this feels good too. I think we can just go this way.
Mm. I wanted to say before that I think the deconditioning process is a process of awakening,
Hmm.
because I think about the times where I've been in those really dark places of uncertainty, of challenging all the belief systems that I've carried, like a dark night of the soul.
Hmm.
And it's led to greater awareness and greater consciousness.
Yeah.
But it's like that really scary peeling back of those beliefs. And that is what I think about when I think about deconditioning. It's like peeling back those layers of the things that we've picked up along the way that aren't really us,
Hmm.
in order to get back to our authentic selves and to question and challenge those things,
Hmm.
those opinions, those thoughts, those beliefs, those ways of being that aren't really authentic to us,
Yeah.
which is what
Yeah.
human design is really all about, isn't it?
I mean, it has been for myself.
Yeah.
I'll I'll say.
I can't, I shouldn't project that opinion onto everyone. Like everyone can use this system however they want to use it. Some people use it to make a lot of money. Some people use it to create businesses, whatever they want to do. But for me, it's been a journey of like reconnecting with myself and
Yeah.
having a system to like almost give you permission to be like, no, well, you already know who you are underneath it all, but this is just a little reminder.
Yeah. One of the first things that I remember like really loving about human design was the idea that it was an experiment, that you
Mm.
had to actually play with it. And I remember one time saying, oh my gosh, I just feel like I'm going to have so much more joy. And thinking back to that moment, like I'm not wrong. I have honestly have been more happy, whatever that looks like, been more at peace. I'll say that. Like,
Mm.
certainly have been more at peace since coming across human design, and just the way that life has unfolded since then. Like, a lot of different things were changing at that time in my life. Like, I had gone through a breakup, I had like a 10-year relationship breakup. I was in the hospital for a week. I had to, I didn't have to, but I chose to move back into my mom's house for that time. Um, yeah, I had gotten, oh, it was 2020. So everything with COVID and life was just, that was happening too. Um, so it was very synchronistic for the timing in which like I came across human design.
Mm.
And honestly, I've had more peace in my life since. It's just, and it's been fun. It's not like, to me, it hasn't been like therapy. right? Or something a little bit more formal, I would say. I mean, certainly I've had plenty of years of experience in those things too, but I think that working with like my strategy, my authority, and things like digestion and environment have all sort of been like my own little personal life hacks. That's actually exactly what they've been. And
Mm,
I've just like had a lot of fun with it too.
yeah. It's been like the most profound tool that I've discovered
Yeah.
personally to work with so
Yeah.
far, but I haven't had the same sort of experience. For me, um, I have experienced overall, I would say, a lot more peace and a lot more self-acceptance and self-love for the parts of me, for these different parts of me. But I have, because I have, I think, that channel of abstraction, and I also had a really strong attachment coming into finding human design of wanting to discover my purpose and wanting to know like who I am and why I'm here. I was really holding on to like hoping that the system was going to tell me clearly, this is who you are and this is what your purpose is. And it has, in a way, it's told me this. But like you say, it's an experiment. It's not something that, and for everyone, it's going to mean a different thing. Like, even if we have the same gate defined, it's going to present based on all of the different variables, like our variables, and then also the aura type, the energy type, the strategy, the authority, like all of these different things. It's going to present completely differently from one person to the next. I mean, this is the science of differentiation, which I
Right.
love. That it's just showing us how we're all so different. But I was really tied to wanting to know what my purpose was. And it's only been recently where I've let go of some of that control and let go of that attachment and really accepted the process of confusion, like what we were saying before, accepted that I don't need to know, and let go of my mind's desire to want to have all the answers and to want to know everything, that I've actually been able to experiment with it in a way that's not attached. And I've had some really big insights in the last week, which is showing me actually part of my purpose. So isn't it funny that like letting go of the control and letting go of the needing to know and the attachment actually can open up so much more that can be revealed?
Yeah.
It's far-sightedness. It's not that limitation of
Right.
short-sightedness.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to know like what insights have you gotten from letting go of some attachment?
Okay. Well, I told you. So I came into a road bump with my business,
Yeah.
which is based around mindfulness and meditation. This is what I've been teaching for the last 3 or 4 years coming up now. And I was trying to create this business under this business name, this brand name. And I've just been feeling like it's so aligned. The work itself is so aligned. Like, if you look at my incarnation cross, so much is about presence, about being in the moment, about being in your body, connecting to spirit. There's so much about self-acceptance and acceptance for all beings, actually. There's so much about being. The 10th gate is all about being. The 15th is all about accepting and loving humanity. The 46 is all about loving the body, loving the journey. Like, it all relates so much to mindfulness and meditation. So the work itself is super aligned, but the way I was trying to do it felt really like forced, and it felt really limited, and it felt like I just kept hitting these road bumps, like these setbacks. And so what happened last week was I was trying to get my name, my brand name, trademarked. And I got my application back from the organizing body in Australia that runs trademarks. And there was an issue with the trademark because someone else owns or has it trademarked under that category. And my initial reaction, which I shared with you, Rafa, over a voice note, was I just don't want to deal with this. I just don't want to have to deal with this stuff. And like, I'm an ego manifester. I'm meant to do what I want to do, or not do what I don't want to do,
Right.
the things I don't want to do. And so it kind of, I sat with it, and it really led me to realize that I'm trying to confine myself and my business under this brand name that in a way is limiting, because it limits me to just be this one thing. And could I just operate as Hannah Weir, as myself, and still do all the work that I'm doing? It doesn't have to change the actual work that I'm doing, but I'm just not putting myself into a box of only being a mindfulness and meditation teacher, or only being this or that. And this, I think, has actually made me realize that this is part of the work I'm here to do, is to teach people that it's okay to just be yourself, and you don't have to put yourself into all these different categories. And in fact, loving yourself and being this vessel of love is about loving and accepting all the different parts of you that maybe they don't logically make sense. And maybe our minds would try and say, no, this is the way you need to do it. But actually, like, you are free to just be yourself and show up however you want to show up. And for me, the thing that feels most authentic is to just show up as myself. And still, I can create courses or workshops or whatever it is that I'm like wanting to create, but I don't have to try and run it under a business name. And that's completely okay for people if that's what they want to do, but it doesn't feel authentic to me. It feels really limiting to my spirit. And it feels really limiting to like my interests. I have so many different interests. How can I try and put it into one category or define it? Like, I've really struggled with this need to label and define who I am. But like what we've talked about so many times here, you can't define your essence. So
Yeah. And you know what I thought about was language, and we've said this before, and it's often said, especially when you're going through something like the gene keys, that language can just be so limiting at times, and words can be so limiting at times, where really what it sounds like is now that there's just an opportunity to allow yourself to, and I think I might have even said this to you, to embrace like the vastness of who you could be, which for everyone and anyone, I think that that's just, it's really nice, I think, to have like the actual experience shared with, let's say, like the principle of something that we're talking about, because oftentimes I feel as if we could we could go through different teachings and not really get like the actual real life experience of how could this apply, like I'm just thinking about when someone throws a concept of like surrender, and they think that it's like giving up this control or whatever their opinion is of that word surrender, right? And I feel like it's actually really supportive to have an experience like what you just shared with us, and how that ties into letting go of a label or a name or a word, um, because then I feel like that gives somebody something to work with how it can relate to their own lives. And I just say this, um, I had shared with you a few weeks ago, I finished the surrender experiment. And I feel like from that book, while I've had my own ideas and opinions of what the concept of surrender means, I feel like now I have an even deeper understanding from somebody who has practiced what that concept really is about and has shared it just so straight to the point, so beautifully in that book. And um, it's just given me more of a basis to work off of, to create my own sort of opinion or idea of what that means for me. And I feel like that's essentially what, I think one of our purposes are here, and what you've just shared with us is that we don't have to be limited by our opinions or our labels. or our beliefs just because they were there, or they just because they've developed that way doesn't mean that we have to stay attached to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me think of the 16th gene key that we talked about last week, and this topic, or this idea of versatility, but actually how it does serve a purpose to hone in on a skill, or to be focused on something for a period of time while you're building that skill. And I feel like that's almost what life was showing me with this brand that I was operating under over the last couple of years, because it was allowing me to focus my attention on becoming a really good meditation and mindfulness teacher. And now that I don't want to necessarily say mastered that, but I have accumulated enough experience to feel confident to then take that with me into the next chapter. And I really do feel like I'm being led by life. The whole purpose of this podcast, the premise of our name, a label, but I really feel like I am being led by life into now a deeper level of self-acceptance, in letting go of attachment to having to operate under that title or that label in order for it to make sense. And just taking those skills that I've acquired into the next chapter with me. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting for two people who don't have the like a consistent maybe relationship with the 17th, could have so much to say on opinions and beliefs, but I think that's because we both have defined ajnas. So I feel, and defined throats.
Yeah.
So it's like in some way we still very much can relate, and may be part of our responsibility to develop some of these attributes or some of these skills or the gifts that come with these energy centers themselves, and express them. Not that our way is the right way or the only way, but I feel like if we're here to, essentially the gene keys is like a higher purpose. It's it's a different experience of living. And so if we're here talking about them and exploring them, then I feel as if part of what all of this really is to do is to allow it to kind of ripple throughout humanity a bit more, of having the conversations or experimenting with um, all kinds of different things that might not be comfortable at first, you might not be used to, but are also very much like so you and so part of your like soul's purpose. And even these words seem big, but I think that it's because we've gotten so far disconnected from that. And I feel like people who truly stand in embodying like what it's like to be connected with the soul, to connected with spirit, with source, with earth, with the moments of life. I feel like they don't sit here like maybe a part of me is right now and kind of saying like, who are you to say these words? Well, like, who am I not to, is what I want to say back, right? And yeah, it's different to sit here and allow myself to just say whatever I want. Um, but I think in some way we're all sort of meant to do something that might be a fear, quote unquote, might be like a fear for us, but really it's like our greatest liberation.
So beautifully said. It makes me think that Marianne Williamson quote,
Yeah.
like, who do you think you are, or whatever. I'm not going to
I
say
have
it
it
properly.
memorized because it's one of my favorite quotes.
You
So
know
I'm
what I
pretty
mean.
sure
Oh,
like
yeah.
I summarized it and regurgitated it a little differently, but yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's part of our own processes of being manifestors, claiming this bigness, this aura. But it is, I think, like you say, part of everyone's process to own who you are.
Yeah.
And maybe I feel extra passionate about this because that's part of my purpose, to show people and teach people that it's okay to be yourself and to accept and love and embrace all these different parts of you.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is like stepping up in a way and claiming, like, you did come here with a higher purpose. You didn't come here to be small, to play small, to hide your gifts from the world. You came here to share them.
Yeah. I just think of like all of the lies we tell ourselves that get in the way of not being able to like really embrace that, to not feel like we can really do that. And I don't know, I can get pretty passionate too about wanting to hold like a bigger vision for others. And I guess it's because I've always just held a bigger vision for myself. And it reminds me of I had watched the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary on Netflix. And it's just so interesting because like I didn't really like pay attention to him. I didn't even really watch like the Terminator movies. But I think of this word of foresighted. Far-sighted? Is that what the gift is? Far-sightedness?
Yeah, I think
Right?
so.
And I think I'm taking in our conversation and all of a sudden I'm thinking about him. And he's so assertive with the fact that he had a vision for himself and he created it. Essentially, like he held on to this vision, these dreams, these aspirations that he had for himself, and he did not let himself not get there. And the way he's like, there's like a conviction when he shares like how determined he was to make that vision like a real life reality for him. And I don't know, maybe we all have something to learn from people who can hold those visions. Because I mean, I also have, like I mentioned, an open head head center. So like my crown is it's open center. So I've been recognizing that I actually get inspired from something outside of me. Like I don't know if it's the same for you. You'll have to share with me, but I've noticed that like for me, inspiration doesn't just like drop if I'm like, it can. Okay, I'm not gonna be black and white about it. But something outside of myself usually helps inspire me to feel um inspirational, or I'm forgetting kind of other things that go on with the head center other than like, spirituality and um yeah, that's it. Like that's just what I want to say because I'm just noticing that when I watch things, when I interact with people, when I'm like reading something, movies will do it all the time. Side note, I watched The Dark Knight and I left the movie theater saying to myself, I'm going to write a book. I don't know what it was about The Dark Knight that I left the movie theater that night. And I was like, I'm going to write a book.
I
It's
love
so
that.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a bit of a different experience because of through the awareness of like learning about human design, I've been told it's not actually correct for me to look outside of myself for inspiration because I have the channel of inspiration, the creative. So anything creative, it comes from within me. And then like with the ideas and the inspiration that I feel like come more from source and come from the head centers and that process, it's in solitude, it's in space, it's in time, it's in meditation. That's when I get those ideas and that inspiration drop in. And so I'm working with not looking outside of myself, but like we're all different, and it is correct for some people to get inspired by what they see outside of them. And I mean, these are all just the different nuances, right, of the energetics.
Right.
But something that came to me before when you were talking about this idea of holding a vision for yourself, and how Arnie like had this just unwavering self-belief and this unwavering, like, I'm going to do this, and not letting anyone else get in the way of that. I was thinking about like what actually holds a lot of people back from following their dreams and following their passion and exploring or pursuing a higher purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, this is again an opinion, but I would say that probably a lot of that is the fear of the opinions of other people. Would you agree? Like what other people might think of me, and what other people might say, and other people's perceptions and perspectives would get in the way of people trusting in themselves and believing in themselves and pursuing their passions and dreams.
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, isn't the reactive expression of this, or the repressed, one of them being self-critical? So, I mean, that's not exactly what you're saying, but essentially if I'm critiquing myself, I'm critiquing myself so that if you're going to critique me, I got you before you got me.
Yeah.
You know? But what came to me was essentially like, I think that's why I love the Gene Keys, is because beneath it all, like when we're in the shadow of something, it always comes back to some sort of fear. I mean, so to answer your question, I feel like, yeah, because every time we talk, right, we're kind of, and in every like reading that I've come across or experience of teaching of a different gene key, it's most of the time it's like in this shadow experience, it's this frequency of fear, fear of something. And it's just very interesting how it's so kind of just like sprinkled throughout all of our human experiences.
The fear of, I mean, fear itself is so multifaceted, but like the fear of not belonging, the fear of not survival, it's encoded in our genes to want to survive and to fit in and to belong. And so of course it makes sense that if we do things that other people might reject or criticize or not understand, we fear that we won't belong, we fear that we won't fit in. And I feel like this is exactly why I was not, or I felt like I had to do things in a certain way. To go back to that example I shared earlier of my business and how I'm operating, like the whole reason I created a brand was because I was afraid that it wouldn't make sense to people if I just started all of a sudden sharing meditations or content related to mindfulness on my Instagram or my YouTube. People wouldn't understand, like, why is she all of a sudden doing this when she was doing that before? I mean, first of all, as a manifestor, I'm not here to worry about who's getting on board. I'm not here to think about, like, how are people responding or to worry about the outcome. I'm just here to follow my urges that are given to me from source. Like, I'm just here to follow what I'm here to do. And so I've really recognized that so much I was in that shadow of fear and worrying about other people's responses and will it make sense, and the opinions and perceptions of others. And it just doesn't serve me anymore. And I'm also not here to do things in the way that anyone else is doing them. So why am I trying to fit in when I'm meant to stand out?
Mm,
And that's how we belong. I really
yeah.
think that's how we belong, is by belonging to ourselves and
Yeah.
allowing ourselves to accept ourselves as we are. But you can have so much compassion for that just human fear of not fitting in and not being
Hmm.
understood, not being accepted and loved as you are.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. The way you explained it, I heard it for myself, just like in a similar dynamic, but different experience of, for a long time, trying to figure out the answers of my life, or trying to figure out, like, just, I don't know, that's figure it out. Like, that just was like, figure it out. Like, and I think that that's one of the things that I've come to really learn on how to um, kind of transmute, is this idea that, like, it's okay for me to sit in confusion. And ultimately, like, so I have these two channels, like confusion and doubt, and they're part of my incarnation cross. And so I feel like, similarly to you, there was a period of time where I was just trying to, like I was in so much doubt, like so much, and trying to figure it out, but coming from a place of like being doubtful. And I would say that it's very interesting, and you've already kind of shared this earlier, but for all of these expressions, essentially it's this process of having to just honor that state, to transmute it, to go into a gift,
Mm.
and allow that to express whatever it is that it wants to be expressed. But when we deny that that's our reality in that moment, it just brings up more resistance and more blockages, and just, and that is what it is. Like, it's fine, there's no wrong or right about that. I think it's all just a beautiful experience.
Mm.
um and so, to bring this all in with the 17th, I think that one of the major things that I had, like, realized was that it's okay if things don't make sense logically. We're just so used to operating that way, that we haven't given enough attention to the right side of our brain that is creative, it's messy, it's, not um consecutive, I would say, right? I feel like logic is this consecutive order of things
Mm.
that make sense, and the right isn't. And I think that the 17th has a beautiful place for us, when need be, but it doesn't need to um operate all the time. And it's really not correct for all of us to be operating from that place anyway.
Mm.
So it's correct for me to not necessarily hold a strong opinion for things, I think, for me, so that I can allow, like, a higher consciousness to be expressed through whatever it is that I do.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So fun.
So fun.
What a chat.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation, and
Yeah.
it felt really natural to not overthink it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it just makes me again think of exactly what you just said, this progression, this journey into the gene keys. Like, it's helpful initially to have a set structure, a set way of doing things, to be tied and attached to this is the way we're going to do it. But we've learned through going through this process that that doesn't really work for us, or doesn't feel the most natural
Yeah.
doing it. So we've moved into a more open, less limited way of operating.
Yeah.
And it's all a
Oh,
journey. We're only
it is.
we're only 17 in. We got a long
I
way to
know.
go.
So we'll leave it there and come back next time with the 18th.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for being
Take
here.
care.